Hugging Face is easily one of the important platform in the field of artificial intelligence. In this video, we are going to cover what features are offered by Hugging Face at a very high level. But in the future videos, we'll be taking a detailed look at each of these features. Hugging Face is very similar to GitHub. In GitHub, you'll be able to create public or private repository to host your code, and people can collaborate with you. So if you have created a public repository, anyone will be able to see your code and they'll be able to collaborate with you. And if you have created a private repository, then the people you have invited to collaborate with you on that repository can collaborate with you. And it is the same thing that you can do with Hugging Face, but for models and data sets. So these models are deep learning models, normal machine learning models, or LLMs. There are various different types of models that you can host within Hugging Face, and you can also have varied data sets. So different organizations and individuals would have created data sets for their own research, and if they decided to publish them in Hugging Face and make it public, then you will be able to use those data sets without actually creating them from scratch. You will be, leaning on other researchers' work to carry on your experimentation, right? So that is what the data set is. And we also have something called Spaces. So Spaces is nothing but a hosted version of your model. So when you have your model, this is just a file, right? It doesn't do anything on its own. In order to use that model to, infer something out of it or generate something out of it, you need to host it or you need to deploy it. And one of the options to deploy these models is Spaces in Hugging Face. Okay. So that is what Spaces is all about. And we have something called organizations. When you create your Hugging Face account, by default, you will not be part of any organization. But you can create organizations and you can actually group accounts into that organization. So think of this as a grouping of an account. So for example, if you have a business, and for that business, you can create an organization and you can add individual accounts into those organizations. Those are typically going to be your employees. And by adding those accounts into organization, you'll be able to manage access to all of those accounts at the organization level. For example, if you have published some models and data sets within the scope of that organization, and you only want people in that organization to access those models and data sets, then by adding those individual users into this organization, you are actually granting access to the models and data sets which are available in that organization. Okay, so that is what organization is. And by default, you will not have any organization, but you are free to create any number of organizations. Okay, now let's go in here into models and see what we can do with these models tab. If we go in here on the left hand side, we can see that there are different ways for us to filter the models available for us. Okay, so by default, we can see all the models available here. And as you can see, you can actually sort them by trending, most likes, most downloads, and all these things. And if you see here, actually, we have DeepSeek as one of the top trending model. But if you want to narrow down your search criteria, let's say, for example, you are looking for a model which does a particular task that you are interested in. So for example, let's say we want to do text classification. So if I go here under the natural language processing, we have text classification as one of the option. So if I select this, then the number of models that are going to be displayed on the right hand side is going to be reduced. So if you see here, we have reduced number of models here, and these models are suitable for text classification. Okay, and we can even further filter this down by different properties. For example, if I want to filter this down by a language, then I can go in here and I can choose the language. For example, I want to filter the text classification models that supports Tamil, then I can select this. Now if I see here, the number of models available for me are even reduced now. We only have 51 models that are suitable for text classification in Tamil language. Okay, so these are the things that we can do with the models. Now I have cleared the filters, but if you see here, we have DeepSeek as a top trending model. If I go into this model, we can see that we have options to run inferences. Okay, so this option may not be available with all the models. It will be available for popular models, and DeepSeek is one of the popular model. So there are some inference providers who made this available to us, and because of that we'll be able to quickly run this model in Hugging Face itself. Okay, so let's say for example, if we ask something like who is the president of United States, it has given me the answer here. Although this is not a correct answer, according to its knowledge it is Joe Biden, so it has given that inference for me immediately. So these kind of inferences are possible directly in Hugging Face. Now I want to bring your attention to some of these other options available for us within the model tab. So now I have selected this model, and for this model I have few options here. So one of them is called use this model. So if I see here, I can use this model using two different options. One of them is called Transformers. This is a library built by Hugging Face, and we will cover this Transformers in detail in future videos. If you are using this Transformers library to use this model, then all you need to do is you just need to click here and it will show you the example code that you need to write to use this model for inference. Okay, it is that easy. And we also have other options like VLLM, and this is another option to run your models locally. So, and if you want to deploy this model, you can also choose one of these deployment options. Okay, so these deployment options will vary from model to model, and it depends on what options are made available by these inference providers for that particular model. You will have usually many different options for popular models like DeepSeek or Llama, but if it is a new model or not so popular model, you may not find many deployment options. And you also have option to train this model further, so you can do further fine tuning using different tools. So in this case we have Amazon SageMaker and AutoTrain for further fine tuning, but again this may not be available for all the models. It will usually be available for popular models. Okay, so if I take another model, let's go back and let's search for Llama. Llama is another popular model from Meta. Now if I take this Llama, say 3 billion instruct model, because this is another popular model, you will have many different options. So if I go here, we have both Transformers and VLLM, and for deployment we have even more options than DeepSeek, because this is one of a popular model. You have many different options to deploy this model. Okay, so when we say deploy, this is actually deploying for inference. So obviously we have Hugging Face Spaces as one of the option, which is provided by Hugging Face itself. But if you want to provide other deployment options like other inference providers like Azure ML or Amazon SageMaker, you can still deploy these models on those platforms. And again, we'll have different training providers. This is normally used for further fine-tuning of this model for a specific task, and we have few different options. By the way, these are the options directly integrated with the Hugging Face. If you don't see an option here, it doesn't mean that you cannot use that platform. It just means that you need to do the deployment manually. It will not be as easy as the options integrated with Hugging Face, but it doesn't mean that you can't deploy the model on a particular platform. For example, if you take Azure ML, we don't see Azure ML as one of the options for training, but it doesn't mean that you can't use this model in Azure ML for training. It simply means that we don't have integrated option. We need to do it outside of Hugging Face. Okay, that is what the options we have to deploy and use these models. The other important thing is actually when you open any model, we have this thing called model card. This will actually give you a detailed information about this model. This is nothing but a normal README file, and the model provider will add as much information as possible here to make it easier for the consumers. So if you take this Llama, because I haven't accepted the license agreement for this particular model from Meta, I'm not able to see any of the files. But if I quickly go back and select another model which doesn't have this requirement, let's go back to DeepSeek. If you see here, the model card has all the information that we need to know about that model. And if I go into the files tab, you can see that this model is made up of these files. Okay, so this is, under the hood, nothing but a normal Git repository. Next, let's move on to datasets. Datasets is again a Git repository under the hood, and it is a data set made available by other organizations and individuals. And if we want to explore something and we want some data, rather than creating those data from scratch, we can simply come here and explore these data sets, and if we find something suitable for our exploration, then we can simply use it. Okay, and again, very similar to models, we'll be able to filter these data sets based on different criteria. One of them is modality. So if I select text as a modality, we'll be able to see all text-based data sets, and I can even go down and filter this down by language and other things. So if I only interested in, say, Chinese data sets, then I can filter it. Now you can see that we have 1739 data sets that are actually Chinese text-based data sets. Okay, so if you want to use this data set, again, we have a library from Hugging Face that allows us to download and use this data set very easily, which we'll cover in detail in future videos. So that is what a data set is. Now let's go into the Spaces and have a look at it. So like I said, Spaces is a quick way to deploy your models. Okay, so you'll be able to deploy your model quickly, and then you'll be able to use it for inference. So by default, you'll be able to create simple spaces which doesn't use too much compute. But if you want to deploy it like a production grade model, you need to buy a higher subscription from Hugging Face. So you'll be able to host your model with a better compute capacity. Okay. So again, we will cover these spaces in detail in future videos, but at a very, very high level, this is a way to host your models within Hugging Face itself. And one of the other thing that I want to show you is, if you go in here into your profile section, you have options to create new model, new data sets, new space, and you also have an option to create something called collection. Collection is nothing but like a logical container of models, data sets, and papers and other things that you want to group together. So let's say, for example, you are doing some research and you want to collate different data sets and models related to that. You can actually create a collection and put everything into that. And each collection will have its own page. So in that page, you can add as much information as possible. So this could be for showcasing your work, or adding information for yourself when you come back to this in the future. So we can do all those kind of collation and narration within the collection. So if I go back in here again, and if I click on my profile, you can see that I have one space, which is a private space, which is not actually running now. And you'll be able to see your own model. So these are the models that I published, and you can see them. And these are the data sets I published, and you can also see them. I can choose to keep them as either private or public. In this case, I just made them public, so anyone can view and download these. So in this area, basically, you'll be able to see your own models and data sets. As you can easily see, Hugging Face allows us to upload our own models and data sets, and we can also find models and data sets published by other individuals and organizations. And we can also create something called Space, which allows us to run these models quickly. It becomes clear why this platform is one of the important platforms in the field of artificial intelligence. Okay, so that is all I wanted to cover in this high level video. I hope this is useful. Thank you.